Dear Missoula, where do I begin? I don't know how to do this, how to say what I want to say to you. Right now, outside my rain-lashed Pacific Northwest window, the Pacific Ocean looms against an evergreen horizon, churns wild and smacks hard against the break wall. It's relentless. But I've never really been one for oceans. That's why I chose you in the first place. Missoula, you made me. I gave you 4 years, the finality of my adolescence, some piece of clay raw for your hands, and you fashioned this person. You must realize by now, I'd have done whatever you wanted. I hadn't realized then the scale of your influence on who I've become, your weight, the way you'd carve out a piece of my brain and soul and pour in your own precious metals, torched, hot from the furnace, quick to harden, become rigid, become so unbearably rigid. Dear Missoula, these days, all I have to do is look into any middle distance, out any window, drive down any country road, and there you appear. I've come to realize, I go looking for you. I go looking for you every day.
Looks like you got me where you want me.
It's so often I find myself wanting out or away or gone. That's you for me. Out, away, gone. I have to force myself back to today sometimes. Too often. This room, this building, and its city. It's not you. You've come to mean true north for me, like you're my mother and father, like you're the womb, and I miss the way I was so vulnerable with you, and you found a way to ruin the parts of me that needed ruining.
My love for you won't go away.
Dear Missoula, the day I drove away, I wrote on a paper torn from my notebook. These mountains feel like walls sometimes. I rolled that paper up and wrapped it around the rusted fence at the foot of Mount Sentinel. How many times had I gone to that trailhead, needing something I didn't quite understand? How many times did that trail and distance and altitude calm my nerves, direct me to knowing? You must know. The answers were always there when I went looking for them. At 18, I was not very good with words. You taught me that. I just liked them is all. I liked the stories they told. I liked the people I could pretend to be within them. When I told you I wanted to be a writer, you told me that all mountains needed climbing, and left it at that. Dear Missoula, when I see you now, I see you in seasons. Mostly, you're cloaked in an austere winter, each morning an ache of too cold to breathe, too cold to speak, a cold that sealed my eyelids shut with frostbitten glue, but I loved you best then. In winter, you made me so aware of my body, my muscles and my skin, my beating heart. Going outdoors then was an expedition. Walking down Higgins, crossing the bridge over the river, Norman McLean's river, the one that runs through it.
Just a dry gin drink.
Nighttime coming on early and earlier still, the cold winter sun setting behind the smaller and smaller towns to the west, and the Bitterroot Mountains, Lolo Forest, Frenchtown. On those cold nights, I took to the bars and warmed up with whiskey and the local bluegrass band looking to make it big. I danced until I was too hot and sweat was everywhere. I fell asleep in motion. Or it's September and you're in the embers of summer's smolder, nights growing colder and colder, the press of autumn forcing blankets every time I drove up to the lookout in the South Hills, black coffee in a thermos. Do you remember me then? I was wide open, raw, unlimited, sitting on top of my Jeep, writing poems in my notebook, watching the sky change colors. I never wanted to come down. You had a way of making stillness feel so natural. I still ache for you every October. My skin misses the frozen cockcrow mornings, those college streets, bleeding maples, and the space, the roads with no end. Whenever I needed to run, I always could. Your springs were short and late. I remember the thaw, the exposure of what had died in the cold, the sobering clarity of sunlight, and linens hanging out on clotheslines while ice floes still slid down the river. Summers were a drawn-out laze, a panorama of mountain air and high grasses, hammocks, frisbees, midnight bonfires, and somehow I always found myself by cold water, plunging my body into rivers until everything came out wet and free. I remember, too, how your summers taught me about loneliness for the first time. With university over, everybody but the dog had gone. Do you remember that one week in August, years ago? I filled my backpack, walked out my front door, brought the dog. We walked straight into the mountains that circumference Hellgate Canyon. That was the first time I'd spent more than one night in the mountains. The first time I'd ever experienced solitude in a way that mattered. A cerebral way, a way that intoxicated every synapse. For so long I feared what being alone would feel like. All those hours in my head, the cruel notion of self-dependence. But now, I long for it. Dear Missoula, I left my innocence inside your cupboard, next to all those other fragile things I couldn't help but touch. I liked to run my nascent fingers along edges and seams that were never meant for me. I liked the feeling of flames hot against my skin, and always wanted to be 2 inches too close to dangerous. Under your eyes, I charted my own novice course through impulse and restraint, the windfalls of fragility, of violence, learning guile with how-to guides and wrongdoing. You watched the unfold, the ignorance, the blind need, the willfulness, the desire, my at last undoing. How patient you were, all those months, seasons sheafing seasons, waiting for my mouth to learn the shape and taste of the word no. Dear Missoula, I am no longer dazzled by ferocity.